everybody. Buenas tardes. ¿Cómo están? Woo. I'm sorry, this is like a heater right here. I'm going to, can we turn it? Let's move this way, because you'll boil if we get in front of that. There we go. Oh, this is what democracy looks like. People coming out in the community to share their concerns, their hopes, their solutions. And I'm so grateful to be up here with you. Can you not hear me? So anyway, it is a very beautiful sight to be with everybody today and to be with my dear friend, Christine. And how about, Christine, we start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice for all. And then, of course, the wonderful, I always love the one foot to the flag. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. And that's because New Mexico understands that diversity, equity, and inclusion are good things, not bad things. In fact, this weekend, I went to the No Kings rally in Santa Fe while President Trump was throwing himself a $45 million birthday parade. We had millions across America show up and talk about the importance of an allegiance to the Constitution. I want to say that I celebrate the 250 years within which we have existed and the Revolutionary Army that got us there and that we still honor today. But I think it was really important to have those 12 million people across America raising their voices for all of the different concerns that we have. And 250 years ago, our founding fathers did reject a monarchy because they believed democracy, government by and for the people, was the way in which we achieved prosperity for all. Now, the reality is that Constitution back then did not include all of us. Us women weren't quite in there. Native Americans, enslaved Americans were not included, but we have painted ourselves into that. And we have done so in a way in response to some thoughts about how we elect our leaders. There were those who were worried that we would not be able to elect leaders and we should continue with a king. And Samuel Adams said, no, a moral people will elect moral leaders. And in fact, President Adams talked about the importance of virtue. And he said that virtue is the essence of the Constitution. Without virtue, we will indeed fall back and have government of tyrants and tyranny. And in some ways, I think about that now. I think about the echoes of their voices as they reach us today. And the trust that we carry from that time and that we must pass on to our children and those grandchildren. Nobody can hear me. Sorry about it. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Now I can move on. So what we pass on to our children, that we must indeed make it right. And that we make it right by showing up with each other. We make it right by learning about what the policies are that your elected leaders. And every 2 years, we have elections. Every 2 years, we have elections to make it right when we have made a mistake. And I think that that's a really important thing for us to do, is to make sure we understand what those policies are. And that's why I've been holding town halls across my district. Democrats have been holding town halls across our district. I've been going to Republican districts and holding town halls because they are not holding them in their own communities. And I believe it is important that everybody understand. And we begin by talking about the Betrayal for Billionaires bill, which, as you know, would have a significant impact on New Mexico. It'll have a significant impact on Medicare. It is the largest cut to health care ever. And people don't talk enough about the fact that it will also have a $535 billion cut to Medicare because of the $3 to $4 trillion debt that it will incur and that will be paid for by our children and grandchildren will lead to that $535 billion cut to Medicare. Now it's really going in addition to the cuts to Medicaid, to women not being able to access abortion, even if they have a private insurance plan. These are little details that are stuck in that bill. I just finished a Save Our Rural Hospitals tour. And I need to tell you, there are 7 to 8, maybe 10 rural hospitals that will close if this bill goes through. It is worse in the Senate version than in the House version. And Christine Chandler and her colleagues will be forced to decide, how do we try to fill in that gap? And we cannot fill in that gap. The states cannot fill in that gap. So how do you make those tough decisions about who gets health care and who doesn't? And I need to tell you, I left one of my rural hospitals yesterday. And you know, when you're with somebody and they've gotten a really bad diagnosis or something is really bad, you don't fall apart and cry when you're with them. I walked out of that hospital and I cried on the way to my car because I knew that community was going to lose that hospital. And the patients I spoke with were going to lose their access to the Medicaid that they needed. And Los Alamos should be all right. We're not going to lose the hospitals here in Los Alamos. But you're going to be hit too. And I think that it's also your community that cares about what happens to others in your state, your community that cares about what happens to your neighbors in Española and those health clinics. Oh no, do I have to move away from there? Or?
They fixed yours.
Oh, they fixed this one? Can you hear me now? I'm alive. I'm going to just hold it. Okay, sorry guys. I got all take. I can just yell. Usually I yell, and I speak loudly in this word. But you know, part of the other thing that I wanted to make sure I also spoke at in this town hall was I'm the co-chair. You might not know, I'm the co-chair of the National Labs Caucus. And I've pushed for robust federal support for LANL's science and technology programs, your cleanup efforts, your infrastructure. You know, I remember just a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we have been working on talking about how do we make sure that the labs in New Mexico, our universities, are part of creating that enchanted innovation economy. And I was up here meeting you with the Secretary of Energy, the Secretary of Commerce. We were meeting in Santa Fe about how do we do that? And how things have changed, right? Because elections do have consequences. The American public voted for a particular president, and now we are instead facing a lot of blowback to that progress. As you know, their budget slashes funding for the Department of Energy's Office of Science, cuts that LANL itself had said will hit the lab. These cuts jeopardize everything from basic research to the technology transfer programs that I have been championing and have, in fact, have gotten language in the appropriations in the years past to increase and make sure we have more spent on that. That will go back. You know that the cuts to our hard research, the attacks on education institutions, the attacks on allowing students to come in from other countries and study with us will weaken our preeminence in science and technology and the role that plays. And then the cuts to places like USAID will weaken the role we play in a country that needs to be stabilized. And so these are things that I worry about a lot. And I do, however, work across the aisle on issues with our senators, and Los Alamos County for a better approach. And one example that I wanted to point out is the bipartisan proposal to create an energy community infrastructure grant program that would be modeled on a defense program that would fund roads, emergency services, and public facilities around a national lab, because the lab doesn't exist in isolation, right? Nothing exists in isolation. We're always ecosystems. And so we want to make sure that that happens. As a member of Congress, I think it's also important that we fund smaller things. I was up here a year ago with the $300,000 I helped secure for your wonderful YMCA. I played a little bit of basketball there. Everybody was taller than me. So I am part of the and I'd never really done things with a ball before, so I didn't really ever hit the hoop. But I am part of, I'm really going off script. Please join me in supporting cancer awareness. I'm going to join the Congressional Women's Softball team, even though I'd never played softball before. And tune in on that one. But these are little things, right, that are important. These little projects, these community projects that we were able to fund, they also cut those last year, right? In so many ways, the way they're coming after us is so, it's everything and everywhere, from arts to culture to science to education to health to justice to, gun violence to supporting our missing and murdered indigenous peoples to selling off our public lands. It is a barrage. It is a barrage. But we are not practicing despair. We are practicing hopefulness. And there are places where we are winning. The number of court cases that have been filed against this administration are where they're topping over 250. And we need to say we have had decisions on almost 200, 100, and it goes up every day, that say, no, what you're doing is illegal, what you're doing is unconstitutional, what you're doing is not authorized by Congress. And speaking of making sure that we are authorized by Congress, I know this community especially is up to date on what's happening in Iran. Because this community knows issues around nuclear safety and nuclear non-proliferation like no other community in the United States. And I am incredibly concerned that the current war could rapidly spiral into a border war in the Middle East with grave consequences for regional stability and American lives. And I am very clear that Iran must not acquire a nuclear weapon, and that we must do everything we can to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. But the authority to declare war belongs solely to the United States Congress. President Trump does not have congressional approval to take offensive military action against Iran, and that's why I have signed on to the Bipartisan War Powers Resolution to prohibit U.S. involvement in the Israel-Iran war without congressional approval. I have called on Speaker Johnson to immediately reconvene the House to respond to possible military action in Iran. He must also immediately convene a classified congressional briefing on the escalating conflict. But let's be clear how we got here. Although imperfect, the Obama administration had negotiated a nuclear agreement that successfully and verifiably prevented war from attaining a nuclear weapon. President Trump withdrew from that deal, removing restrictions and giving Iran a green light, in essence, to resume its nuclear ambitions. And we must work with our allies to go back to pursuing a diplomatic resolution, one that ends Iran's nuclear programs and ensures it cannot threaten Israel or regional peace. Diplomacy backed by strength and coordination by all of our allies, remains our best path forward. And I'm also clear that we must continue to do what we can to protect Israel from oncoming. That defensive work that we're doing in Israel should continue. But let's get back to how we're fighting back against Trump's damages at home. And so, I want to share real quickly, that Rules Committee, I sit on the Rules Committee, and the Rules Committee is where all the bills come before they hit the floor. So I got to DC on Monday, flew out, worked nonstop, got there, worked nonstop, woke up Tuesday morning, and had a full day of fighting issues. We started the Rules Committee, which was really the only big place we could seek amendments, at 1 a.m. in the morning. I called it the vampire committee hearing because they wanted to suck the healthcare out of America's veins before the sun rose. But we sat there and we fought them and fought them. We fought 101 Democrats appeared before a committee to testify on their amendments. We made sure that the Republicans were forced on that committee to vote no on a range of amendments that protected everything from our public lands to our Medicaid, to our Medicare, to our research dollars, and on and on and on. One little clip I did where I pointed out that they were willing to provide subsidies to tanning beds while they were ripping away our rural hospital beds, received almost 5 million clips on thing, and it forced them. That's something like that going viral. Force them to remove that shameful tanning bed provision, right? But that was a little piece. They didn't remove, they are giving now a tax breaks to gun silencers, and that tax breaks to gun silencers is exactly what it costs to fund the Corporation for Public Service, and that shows you their priorities. But we are going to keep that, because by doing that, by staying up all night, by fighting it, by showing up, by having everybody retweet and repost and re-comment on what we were doing, that bill is so underwater. Twice as many people oppose it as support it, and that's across the country, not only in New Mexico. And that's how we are going to get those 4 Republicans in the Senate or those 5 Republicans in the House to say no to some of the worst aspects of the bill. And so when people ask me, what can we do? I say, live the Constitution, live the First Amendment. It gives us the freedom of religion. So if you love to pray, get up and pray in the morning, because we need all the blessings we can get. It gives us the freedom of speech, and stand up and speak your mind. And whether it is giving me a hard time about what I'm doing, or giving me thanks for what I'm doing, giving me ideas about what we can do, use your freedom of speech, use your freedom of assembly. Participate in the freedom of press, and the freedom of press is not just writing those letters to the editor, keep that up, writing those op-eds. The freedom of press now includes the press, when you think about it, is the entire social network, which is why it is important to keep retweeting and reposting and going on. And that's how, when we are engaged in all of this, when we are asking redress of our government, we are also doing something that those founders thought about 250 years ago. We are belonging to each other. We need to remember that our democracy, we belong to each other, and we are bound to each other in a greater purpose, and that is to actually live the Constitution and all of those provisions, all of the provisions in the Constitution. And you know what? When we do that, we also feel joy and connected inside, which is the perfect antidote to the hatred and division that we are seeing across our country. But it's not everywhere. And when you think of 12 million people showing up to be bound with each other, to belong to each other, that is what gives me hope. But the other thing that gives me hope is that we have amazing leaders like Christine Chandler. We have amazing leaders like Christine Chandler, who has been on the forefront, and I don't need to tell you how great she is, because you know how great she is, and you keep electing her, and keep doing that. And I'm going to turn this over to Christine Chandler and see if I can figure out how to turn this off.
Oh, it's so good to see you. So good.
And stay away from that, because it's a heater.
Okay. It is a heater. Whoa.
I know.
All right. Can you hear me? Aren't we lucky? We are so fortunate to have a congresswoman who is standing up every day for us.
Okay, let us get
issues.
this turned off. did you get turned
And
on?
I'm going to get my little notepad to just address a few things that very much tie into what Teresa was telling us. The state is really at risk to lose a lot of money from the federal government that we rely very heavily on. And it's not just that, and I'll get to that in the context of healthcare in a minute, but think about the environmental regulations that are being pulled back by the president through executive order, through legislation that the Republicans are pushing through. Scary stuff. Some of it we can backfill on the state level. Some of it we have been backfilling on the state level. But of concern to me is the possibility that the Congress could eliminate our ability to do that through various preemption rules. And that happens at various times. That's trying to happen right now with AI regulations. There's a provision in the reconciliation bill that would limit the state's ability to regulate AI. And when I'm talking about AI, I mean things like privacy rules, how information is collected, how information is used. That's being addressed right now. I know there are efforts to eliminate it, and I think they should be successful, but it's concerning. And it shows a trend. It's very much consistent with a trend we're seeing where apparently states' rights is no longer a priority for the majority. And instead now, they are dictating to the states as to what they can do on a lot of levels. But so far, New Mexico's been fabulous in terms of efforts to protect members of our LGBTQ community. We support doctors and their ability to advise and provide treatment. We are not interfering with that in any way, unlike states like Texas, other places where, and you just saw the Supreme Court rule that children can be denied access to necessary medical care. It's shameful, just shameful. But this is a turning point for us. Food safety is an issue. Access to vaccines now are being challenged. Science in and of itself is being challenged. Broadband funding is being put at risk as well. And you know how hard we've all been working to get broadband in our rural communities. You see the road project every day when you're coming up the hill or going down the hill. Those kinds of things are being at risk as well. So to some extent we can backfill. But the threats to Medicaid and Medicare should be concerning for all of us, notwithstanding the fact that I know many of us here in the room have private insurance and aren't at risk directly. Think about it though. Over half of our residents are on Medicaid, right? We as a state made decisions to expand access to Medicaid because we want as much access for our residents as possible. And our governor, working with the legislature, have been preparing programs that would allow that access. All of that is at risk. So what does that mean? That means it's going to be harder for us to recruit doctors. I hear a lot from you all about concerns that we have about doctors leaving the state, doctors retiring, not being able to get into a physician. But remember, a lot of those physicians are paid, at least in large part, through Medicaid and Medicare. And if we are starting to lose access to those very important programs, that is going to affect us in Los Alamos, who are already seeing shortages. I hear from my constituents periodically about my doctor is retiring, I can't get another doctor, doctors aren't coming to the state. There are a lot of reasons for that, but one of them is the fact that we have a high population that is on Medicaid. And the state has been increasing Medicaid payments to doctors. That was one of our initiatives to try to support not only the medical community, but access to health care. That could be at risk if Medicaid funding is cut to the degree that we are hearing. I know all of you heard probably on PBS, I listen to public radio every night, which is also at risk. The information that the Congress was just mentioning, rural hospitals possibly closing, they rely a lot on Medicaid. And Why are we talking about this? Because we want to fund a very large tax cut package that really is going to benefit the wealthiest in the state. And one really has to wonder, what the heck are we doing here? Who are we supporting? I ran for office, and I know that Congresswoman did as well, to help people, to ensure they have access to services, to ensure they have access to a good education. And all of those things now are being threatened. We on the state level are working hard as best we can within the financial resources that we have to backfill as much as possible. But we have a finite amount of money as well, and it is going to be very difficult to make up for everything. But we are working at it. We have a working group right now working through the summer where we're getting prepared should this horrible bill pass and these huge cuts hit the state of New Mexico. But I don't know where we're going to be at with that, and I think we all need to be grateful that we have this Congresswoman, others in the delegation fighting on our behalf, and we just have to make sure we are behind them 100%. Stand up, speak out, write to not just our local officials, but to the president and all the Republican leadership in the two chambers so they can see we are not going to stand for this. And with that, I think we're ready for questions. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, okay.
Oh, we have to put this back.
And I'm going to turn my mic off for a minute.
Yeah. We could maybe just go back and forth with
Okay,
the one.
yeah, so we don't,
Yeah.
I'm afraid we're going to have feedback.
Yeah.
All right, so let me see. Joyce.
So we'll go with wherever Joyce is, raise your hand and we'll take the mic to you.
Oh,
there we
could
go.
read it too.
Yeah, we'll let her. That way there.
And Joyce is one of my closest friends, so I can't believe I picked her card.
She could not see who wrote it. We cannot see anything.
I don't
up
have
here.
my glasses
I have
on.
to say we're a little in the dark here.
Yeah.
All right, now that I'm ready for the question, I can't believe I'm the first one. I just took one facet of which Christine already addressed somewhat. I'm really concerned about what's stuck in this big bad bill, about the states not being able to do anything, a regulation of AI. And I just would, like a little more, even though you addressed it, Christine, I didn't realize you were going to. But please explain so everybody understands what's in that bill. And I can't believe it can stay in the bill because I don't see why it's a budget item, but I don't understand more. Can you help with a little bit of this?
So I think it goes back to, over and over again, what we are seeing with not just this administration, remember they were implementing Project 2025. So if you want to kind of understand where some of this comes from, you can look at Project 2025. The other place that a lot of this comes from is there was a lot of money. The billionaire donors that will benefit the most from this bill, if you make $3 million and above, you are doing well in this bill and you gain. If you make $150,000 and below, you lose. Especially if you make less than 50,000. But there's part of it comes from, so look at, is it a Project 2025 Heritage Foundation, which has a big white Christian nationalist component to it, to be honest. But that's like that's one thing. And then another area is the big money that went into electing Republicans and Trump. And that money came from crypto, that money came from the tech bros, as we call them. And so they have had a big influence on what we're taking up. And so that's why this was put in there, is in response to some of that. Now it doesn't have, from our perspective, doesn't have the kind of budgetary requirement. But all that turns on one parliamentarian to decide. We got the first stream. They did take out a few things. There was a revote on the bill last Thursday in the House. Last Wednesday in the House. Because there were some things in there that were just like everyone said, there's no way that's not coming over at all. And even the idea that it gets sent over, we need to take it over. So we said, well, this is a redo vote. So people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who said, if I would have known that was in there, I wouldn't have voted for it. We called them, we did a town hall with all the women senators. I'm the chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus. We are 96 women strong, historic. So we did a hearing, and I loved it. Senator Klobuchar. Oh yeah, the Oops Caucus. So the Oops Caucus in the House, the ones who said, oh, if I would have known that was in there, I wouldn't have voted for it. Where, there was a particular very loud Marjorie Taylor Greene who said, if I would have known that was in there, we said, your chance. You can vote against the bill now. And so all those people, the people who vote the 12 to 14, I forgot the exact number of Republicans who said, we wouldn't have voted for this if it would have had the renewable energy. Because remember, those renewable energy projects, except for New Mexico, they're primarily in red districts, right? Oh, that was the Oops Caucus. They all voted for the rule. So in the House, everybody who said they didn't like those things voted for it again. But we anticipate that is one of those things. There was a list that came out this morning of things that have already been tossed. There's some banking things that have gotten tossed. There's some natural resources. They had renewable energy projects have to pay a fee, and you can get fast tracked, whereas oil and gas gets a cut. Another hit to the state of New Mexico. We're going to lose about $470-some million because they're cutting oil and gas royalties, and we get about less than 50% of the oil and gas royalties on federal land. So at the same time, they're going to make us pay more for Medicaid. They're taking away some of our revenues because of their cut in royalties. Once again, big business versus regular people. The cuts they've done to all of the financial institutions, the consumer product, big business, big banks versus consumers. AI, the people who control AI versus the consumers, and the states are closest to the people. So the states would be the one looking at this. Do you want to add anything?
Yes, I carried an AI regulation bill this past session. It would have required people who develop algorithms that are used in employment and housing and things to validate the correctness of the information, so that there's not sort of discrimination embedded in the screening process. To me, that just sounded like so reasonable. Big tech came out in a way I had no idea. Google, Meta, Amazon, the whole crew were swarming the roundhouse, much to my surprise, and were able to stall that bill on the House floor. So they are big, and they're now trying to work it on a national level. And as Teresa pointed out, they gave huge amounts of money to the president's campaign, his presidential library, the many galas that they have during the inauguration process. All of them are in that circle, and they're using their power to address this issue as well as others. So if you're concerned about big oil and gas, and I know a lot of the people in the room and here are, be thinking about AI, because that's the next area where the titans are going to try to control the outcome.
Once they finish reading the question, please repeat it so people online can.
Okay, so we're going to repeat the question after you read it so people online can hear. Okay, I'll call on this one and you answer first.
Okay.
James Cooper.
Oh.
My question was about the war with Iran, and maybe you already spoke somewhat about that, but could you talk maybe more and more detail about, the Constitution already says that Congress needs to authorize any military, what obstacles...
Like, why do we have to do it again?
In addition to the fact, I certainly think, attacking Iran is a very foolish thing. And we're talking about leading to another Iraq or another Vietnam. So where do you think it stands in terms of the ins and outs of preventing such a war?
Oh, no, we're
Yeah,
doing this?
there- Yeah. there you go.
Okay,
That's
do you
more
want
your-
to
well,
start
it's more
that
your
one?
area.
Where are you on it, though?
Well, I obviously don't want us to be attacking Iran, Iraq, or anyone else. Oh, the question.
So the question
bad.
was,
Sorry.
that he noticed that I already mentioned it in my opening statement about Congress is the one who has the authority over the war, but he wanted a little bit more detail, and you were going to just say what your position was, and then.
Which is, of course, we should not be bombing or participating in a war in Iran, especially without congressional authorization.
Right. And I think that this is, thank you, Representative Chandler. So I think that that's precisely it. And you say, well, Congress already has the authority, but what we are seeing, and what we have seen from past presidents, Democrat and Republican, is they have used some of these things that there was like, well, I'm not really declaring a war, I'm just doing a little bit, right? And then we end up in actions, military actions, they give them different names, that do take us into war. And the idea that we would use, I believe that the bunker busting bomb is the largest non-nuclear force we have. And the idea that we would use the largest non-nuclear force that we have in the United States and not call that an act of war is nonsensical. And the question is, should we or should we not? But we're all going to have our different positions on that, but we should at least require that the Constitution said, Congress, it's your job to get the information, to talk to your constituents, to make some of these hard decisions and then defend them. And that's what we should demand. And so the privilege resolution, it's a privilege resolution that's been filed. It has to be sent, it got sent to Foreign Affairs. I think it's 15 days. And then after that, any member can go to the floor of the House and call it up. Now, that's what should happen. Was a privilege resolution regarding the trade. Because similar to war, trade is given to Congress. What Republicans did in order to avoid taking up that resolution was they passed a rule that literally says, it is still, in Congress's mind with the resolution that was passed, it's still March 20th. They said, time shall stop. The calendar dates shall not proceed with regards to that resolution. So if you watch me on Mondays in the Rules Committee, almost every Monday, whenever I can make sure that it is within the jurisdiction, I bring a motion to amend the rule to get the clock working again and say, you are not time travelers, we cannot stop the clock. But I do not put that past them, that they will do something like that in the House. In the Senate, I don't know what they'll do. In the Senate, they were willing to take up a trade, have some conversation around trade. In the House, they're unwilling to touch it at all. But my first job is to say, it's our job, it's our duty, it's our constitutional duty. It's our constitutional duty to demand that Congress do that. Now, whether or not the executive oversteps, and he's overstepping everything, that's why if you actually got Congress to take it up, that could force him not to do it. But until we take control of Congress, until you have Democratic control of Congress, I do not put anything past them. But my job is to do exactly what I've done. So thank you. Thank you for that question. Your turn.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Mary Beth, another friend of mine.
Oh my God, I just keep getting a friend. You should make sure she also pulls your bingo numbers.
Can you draw the lotto next month?
Yeah, I'll work on that.
Yeah.
Representative Ledger, thank you I salute you as a fellow Las Vegas, New Mexico native. And I am working with an Afghan family who was resettled in Santa Fe in 2022. And through the course of supporting them through their state and federal processes, I've become acquainted with their family members and friends who also would have qualified to be brought to the U.S., many of whom have already been approved by the U.S. with priority one visas or already special immigrant visa status, who are being prevented from finishing their journey to come here. And I'm not even sure what I'm asking except what can we do to help these people. It's the closest thing I've seen to my Republican family members who serve in the military are as concerned about this as I am. And is there anything we can do to leverage that fact?
Yeah, I think that this place of where I think raising these issues, there are a lot of military chats, there's military newsletters, there's military publications. And actually, if you read those publications and you read the title might not be as telling, but when you read what's in them, they are not happy with what this president is doing. And especially those who relied on, like their lives depended on those Afghans. And I don't know if some of you saw, one was picked up, right? He saved our lives. And they are our lives because every one of those soldiers is carries with him a little bit of each one of us, right? And we should all feel that obligation. So what's interesting is things that people are doing to try to make sure nothing happens, or if anything happens to people who are already authorized in the system. I think a lot of that is making sure nobody goes anywhere by themselves, making sure somebody always has their camera ready, trying to bring, did you see the one with the 2 National Guards who went with their mother? They dressed in uniform, right? Like trying to bring as much attention to the matter, making sure when something is happening, you let our office know as soon as possible. Where's Carlos? Carlos is our constituent services. And I want to make sure I do that. Everybody, can you come up here? We have Carlos, who is our constituent services director. He is amazing. He has the biggest can of WD-40 ever invented. As you say, we try to get things unstuck in the federal agencies. Our WD-40, I think our WD-40 is just as passionate and good. It's just that we're running into something over on the other side. I don't know, their kryptonite or something that it's not working as well, because they fired everybody, right? They terminated. So there's people that literally are not there to answer the call. Make sure he knows if you run into anything with people who are actually already in, let him know. We'll open up a case. If they're coming to New Mexico, we can represent people in our districts, but if they were due to come here, let them know. I want to make sure you also see here in the dark, so move forward. We got Derek Toledo, who does also out of the Santa Fe office, who does a lot of work with Native Americans and environmental issues. AJ, who is out of Cuba, New Mexico, who does stuff with hospitals, education, land grants, and he has so much energy. It's just amazing. We have our amazing interns and Matt Miller here, and thank you so very much for coming. This is your second town hall? Second town hall. And then Trish Dominguez is our district director. She used to be the top, she was an a Biden appointee at USDA Community Rural Development. So we're very lucky to have her. So Trish, okay, next. Is it my turn? Oh, I forgot to repeat the question. Okay, Brian Cleason. Hi, Brian.
So my question was in regards to the sale of federal lands. New Mexico has US Forest Service and the BLM in New Mexico have an opportunity, they may lose several million acres of public ground. Just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
It's outrageous, shameful, and it is, we're going to, oops. Okay, I forgot to repeat the question. See what happens when you don't repeat the question? The machinery goes against you. The question is, with regards to the sale of land and the fact that New Mexico stands to lose several million acres of public land, and what are we doing about it? It is incredibly shameful because they say, oh, it's for housing and infrastructure. I'm sorry, what kind of housing and infrastructure are you going to put all over the place, right? And who's going to be able to afford that housing? There's nothing that says it needs to be affordable housing. There's nothing that says it needs to make any sense. There's nothing to protect large dispositions of our land to maybe, you know, we have a lot of rent, you know, maybe somebody who's, these billionaires who like, oh, I'd love to have let me get a section of some of our most beautiful forest services. I'm going to use it for housing and put a $2 million home up there for myself. Does that count? Really? Because it could, right? And somebody want to make a bid, I call it your private little, your very own wonderful little ski area here.
Yeah.
Right, is somebody going to come in? Because that's all on Forest Service land, right?
No, it's private.
It's private. Oh, then you get to keep it. But what about if they want to go in and take Valles Calderas? Right, we acquired that. Right? And not all of it, because the things that are actual, but monuments, wilderness, I mean, there's like, the parks are protected. You know, very few things are protected. We had a provision, another nighttime, you know, midnight provision, where they put in a provision to force the sale of land in in Nevada and Utah. And we were able to get, and that was a very small piece, but it was like no sale of public lands. We were able to get it stripped in the bill, the oops vote. The 40 pagers, I said, you know, they passed the whole bill, lots of attack on that. And we were able to get that stripped in the House because there are a lot of us who are part of a public lands caucus, and I need to give a shout out to Gabe Vasquez, who started that as a bipartisan caucus. Really great. He's the co-chair. He sits on it with Brian Zinke, and there are a couple of Republicans in the House who have said it's a bright red line. Once again, we have a lot of Republicans saying there's a bright red line, and then when it comes down to it, they vote for it, right? But we're hoping that Brian Zinke will work on that. We're hoping, we'll see, because they said we're going to get all kinds of money for that, and it's supposed to be market value, but what market? There's no requirement for appraisals, there's no requirement for anything, and it is a fast sale, because they want to get those sales done before we win back the House, the presidency, and the Senate, because they know we will stop it. So what we're doing, our process here is the same thing. Live the First Amendment, because when you live that First Amendment, you might be connecting with somebody who knows a Republican senator. Like, we need some of those Republican senators to say this can't go through, it is so unpopular. You know, so if you come from a state, you have good friends in a state that's represented by Republican senators, ask them to reach out to them. We need to get to them, because your delegation is strong against this, and it is outrageous, and we are going to do everything we can to highlight that as much as possible, because it's also incredibly unpopular with the American public. They don't want us to sell our public lands. Thank you. Oh, guess what? We all sent that letter to Johnson, and we are getting a bipartisan briefing on Iran. So at least we're getting, okay. How are we on time? We're good. Oh, good. I'm so used to saying I'm late and you got to go. It's so nice.
Okay, Jim Coons.
And you'll be in charge of remembering
I
to
do.
say the question.
Okay, I'll try.
So my question has to do with messaging, and I'll just say that Congresswoman Fernandez, we really appreciate you showing up at some of the protests that we've seen. Also the MLK speech, I think you really stand out. And we just really appreciate it. But there's so much chaos that is projected from this administration, and I think it's such an opportunity for the Democratic Party. My question is there any way to select? I think of how Martin Luther King Jr. was selected, and that's maybe I'm a romantic from the 60s, but there was a process for selecting a leader, a person who stood in front of the American people every day to fight the fight for civil rights. And I think this is such an important opportunity for the Democratic Party to provide a consistent, daily, counter narrative, much like what you are saying to us. It's just needed. Is there any effort, is there any way of selecting a leader or going through this process? We know how to do that, we've done it before.
You want to summarize the question?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, she's going to repeat
I
the...
think the public.
No, you need to repeat the
Oh,
question.
okay. Jim said, sorry, we're not educable up here. Jim said how much he appreciated the Congresswoman speaking out and speaking on our behalf and in support of civil rights and the right to speak and any long list of things that we're doing here. She's doing for us. But we don't have a national voice, a single voice like we did with Martin Luther King, which I completely appreciate. The issue there, though, was Martin Luther King was selected by the people. It was not by an organization or, well, okay, he happened to be with an organization, but his voice went well beyond that organization, and that is because he had a message that resonated with so many Americans, and that's what, certainly we need that, but I'm not sure I agree we need one person. I think it's important to have a cross-section of America speaking on this issue, and we're seeing that with Teresa and others in the country, and I think that is important. I understand where you're coming from, but I think many voices, including us, including lay people, people on the ground. Part of what supported Martin Luther King was there were people on the ground marching for civil rights and then against the Vietnam War. That ultimately led to the termination, finally, of the Vietnam War. It took a long time. So people in this room who've been attending the rallies, and I know many of you have, I've seen you there, need to keep it up and recognize it's not going to be necessarily tomorrow and everything's going to be better. This is for the long haul. They have been planning these kinds of activities long before we were conscious of it. We have, that report 2025, but this land grab thing, I was hearing about this when I worked at the local legislature 10 years ago. The Republicans were talking about taking public lands 10 years ago, and nothing has changed. Now they have people on the federal government working for them, and I diverted a little there, but go ahead.
No, I think that's right. I completely agree. I understand, Jim, right, exactly where you're coming from. And I get this question a lot, actually. And I think that there are a couple of important things of what we're doing. There is, I think, a common message that you have 215 or so Democrats actually talking about. And we're right now focused on the bill, and we focus a lot on the transfer of wealth, on the fact that it is, we're doing all these cuts to essential services that people rely on in order to fund, and it really is. I mean, the middle class tax cuts we don't have a problem with. It is literally dollar for dollar. The cuts to education, healthcare, and nutrition are the 1.3 trillion that go to the 3 million and above. It's literally like, yeah. That's not the stuff in the middle that we don't, well, we're not attacking. It's this transfer of wealth from the poor to the wealthy. That is a common message that we are doing, and that in every district we are doing, and everywhere. And I did it in my district. We had already planned it, but in every district we're doing we're doing a rural hospital, rural healthcare, even people in city districts. It's like, all of the Congress people, if you have an opportunity, we are in rural hospitals and health clinics this week. So we are doing common, you just might not see it at this level. And we do have a process, it's called presidential election and primaries. And that process, what I want is for them to get out early, right? We need all those amazing candidates, because Democrats, this is an official thing, but there are a lot of great voices out there, and they need to be out early so that they help their vision of what the message is. I am the chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus, and in that position, we actually have our policy issues are threefold, and one is economic security. Women can't afford Trump. Groceries are too expensive, right? It is, he's stealing our health care, and it's not just reproductive health care, it's all health care. And then security. We are at risk. Women are at risk. We're getting raped more often right now. The programs that support victims of abuse, of rape, are being cut. Our rights are being cut. They want to take away, make it harder for us to vote, right? So we have all of these about how we're defending against those, but we also have how we are demanding a better future for us. They are tearing down the house. When we rebuild that house, we are not going to put in the same old appliances. We are going to get stuff done to create that path to prosperity for which we are all bound together that I talked about. And it means passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. It means making sure that we can build the affordable housing. It means taking the bigger actions, the more bold actions, to make sure that people are not just making a livable wage, but a wage that allows you to succeed in life and having a home of your own, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We are going to be bound together in that prosperity agenda. And we are going to be talking about both of them as we go along. And that's why in my opening remarks, I talked about that. I didn't go into a lot of the details, but we have the details. My Home of Your Own Act, right? We have the legislation, and we are doing that legislation. So when we come out as the phoenix out of the wreck that they have created, it looks better because there are things that are broken, and we need to fix them. Oh, am I next? Yeah. Okay, I'm next. Charlie Trask, your friend.
Actually, I don't know.
Oh, you don't know Charlie? Finally, somebody that.
Yeah.
Hello, say hello,
Hello,
Charlie.
Charlie. Nice to meet you.
Hi, my name is Charlie Trask. I was born in Los Alamos. I grew up here. Los Alamos is completely flipped from where you used to be. And I'm here to represent the other side, I guess. And I'm not a registered Republican. I'm not a registered Democrat. I'm a registered independent. And I'm tired of the Democrats degrading our president and degrading me. I've been called all sorts of names. I'm not even going to say it because they're too vile. And that's what's, in my opinion, if you're trying to get my vote, I cannot fathom voting for somebody that's calling me despicable names. Now, I've got a second question. The other one is for Ms. Chandler. She voted, and our Democrats in our state house voted to basically to destroy our doctors here by passing House Bill 11 a few years ago. That all my doctors have left. I just spent the last weekend driving to Phoenix to get neurological care because it doesn't exist in New Mexico anymore. So you're crying about a clinic somewhere. I agree with you. We need those clinics, but we also need doctors. And the Democrats have done nothing but take that whole system down in favor of the trial lawyers. And we can debate this offline if you would like. But I just want to voice my opinion that Donald Trump was elected to do a job, and he's doing it. Joe Biden was elected to do a job, and he sat on the beach most of the time. Okay? And that's my opinion. And I knew I would get that reaction because obviously this is more of a political rally than it is an open town hall. If you really want to have a town hall, throw the doors open and let everybody in. Thank you.
Thank you. So Charlie's, I guess you'd say points, are one is he's tired of people like us, what he referred to as degrading the president. And two, I and others in the House voted for, it's actually House Bill 75, that addressed some issues that were in the medical malpractice code. So I want to address that first. There's been a lot of misinformation about House Bill 75, including the fact that no one seems to remember that the Medical Society, the Hospital Association, and several of the large hospitals in the state supported that bill. That has not been publicized anymore, and I know that because before I voted for that bill, I didn't call a trial lawyer. I called the Medical Society, the lobbyists for the Hospital Association, lobbyists for the two largest hospitals in the state to find out whether they supported the bill. Because if they hadn't supported the bill, I would have been asking questions about, okay, what's going on here? I've been told it's a consensus bill. That bill was supported by all those entities that I just named. And I know that not based on hearsay or someone telling me something or rumor. That is based on me personally reaching out to make sure I was getting accurate information. And I hope you all recognize that's what I do when a controversial topic especially is coming up. So, you know, I agree we need to work on that. And we have been, for example, increasing the Medicaid payments. Where do those payments go? They go to doctors and hospitals. We're increasing the revenue stream that are going to those facilities and those providers. But unfortunately, the president and the majority in Congress has decided that's not the way to go. So we're going to be impacted by that. And it's going to undercut our ability to address the doctor shortage in the state. I'm just telling you that. That's what's going to happen. We have done other things, like put $100 million in something called the Patient Compensation Fund. That's the insurance fund that helps support med-mal insurance in the state. You don't hear much about that, do you? $100 million over the last 3 years to help pay and keep premiums down for doctors. We're working on a recruitment fund to get doctors into the state. Loan repayment programs to get doctors into the state. There's a multifaceted approach to work on doctors, and it seems to me that we're fixated on one issue, and that's med-mal. And if we continue down that path, we're not going to solve the problem because it's going to take a multifaceted approach. I spent a lot of time on this one. And in terms of degrading the president, criticism is appropriate in a democracy, and that's what everybody has the right to do, including you all criticizing me, you all criticizing the Congresswoman. We accept that as part of the process, and if the president can't accept it, he's playing in the wrong playpen.
Thank you. And Charlie, thank you. Thank you so very much. And Charlie, I really, really want to thank you I'm so glad we picked your card. I'm very, very happy that we picked your card because it is an open town hall, right? Because we want to make sure that we hear from everybody, because your question was really useful, because then we could have the representative explain her process. So perhaps you know a little bit more about her process. And I will tell you that I completely agree that it is in this dialogue where we are obligated to raise the issues and to raise the way in which policies affect people. Because I am very aware that many people voted for this presidency because they wanted certain things to take place, right? They were worried about the cost of living. They were worried about how expensive things were. My problem, and the reason I criticize him, is he has done nothing to bring down the cost of living. Right? Nothing. The trade wars have raised the cost of living. The chaos with those trade wars has raised the cost of living. Right? They destroyed people's savings, and then it goes back and forth and back and forth. Right? We have nothing that we have done, nothing we have passed out of the House has done that. And what they are doing now is a betrayal, and that's how I describe it. I don't describe it as something that it's not that anybody who voted for them's fault. That's why I use the word betrayal, because I think it is a betrayal of the people who thought he was going to do something different. And with regards to issues like, for example, immigration, the immigration system is broken. I do not debate that. But when you say you are going to have mass deportation and go after criminals, and instead you are taking Customs and Border Patrol agents who would normally be busy interdicting drugs that are coming into the country, and instead are using them to raid our farms and our schools and pick up people in church parking lots and tear women from their babies, I will always say that's not right. And the other thing I do, and Charlie, I show up in Republican areas because I do think it is important for me to hear that. And I had somebody who I sat with, and I represent a lot of Republican cities. In fact, my biggest city is Santa Fe, which is very Democratic. My next 5 biggest cities in my district are all basically considered Republican cities. And I love going to those cities. I love meeting with the mayors, and they all say, some of the mayors where I say, shh, don't tell anybody, but he voted for you, even though he's a Republican. Because I show up and I help deliver what I'm supposed to do in those cities. I deliver infrastructure, I deliver water, I deliver attention. And even when we don't agree, I had a woman up in Raton say, I am a conservative woman. And you showed up and you told me, and I need to tell you, this is how you need to speak to conservatives. You need to tell them how our ranchers, my daughters are ranchers, and they work really hard and they rely on Medicaid. And we need to make sure that people know that Republican families rely on Medicaid. And that's why I speak up like I do. And so I thank you, Charlie, for asking that question. And now we'll go to the next one, and this time it's my turn. Yes? Oh, I'm supposed to stand where? Oh, right there. Right there. I'm sorry, I move a lot. Okay. Donna Gold.
I just wonder what can be done to rein in vice and protect our community from what they do.
Yeah, I mean, we've never seen, like I said, my problem is not that, we shouldn't try to address our. Oh, the question is, what can we do to rein in ICE and to protect people from what they're doing? So as I noted earlier, and so it's so funny because the question comes right after we talked about it. So as I noted earlier, there is a huge due process concern. There is a huge concern when you actually have a police force, which ICE is, acting in a way that we have never seen in the United States, where people are jumping out of cars, they're unmarked cars. They're afraid to actually, if you are so afraid of your job, right, they're being forced to do things that they may or may not agree with, so they have to be masked so that they are unidentified. That is stuff that we are not used to seeing in America, right? When our police officers show up, they're proudly standing here, we know who they are, right? They show up, right? Right there. It is an interesting thing of where we are now having those who engage in activities for the state needing to be anonymous. There is something weird about that, and the image is dystopian, right? Of people being frisked from places. Like that one of the first ones where you saw the young woman who was calling for the police because she thought she was being abducted. And it happens over and over again. And the fact that they are engaging, the fact that they were able to throw a sitting senator who announces who he is, manhandled him, forced him to the ground, handcuffed him on camera. What are they going to do when they know nobody's looking and that person perhaps has no power? But that person has a power if we pay attention. And it is our views and our eyes and our cameras on what is happening, which is important. It is of showing up, as they did in LA, which were mostly peaceful, right? That is important. We do have, I don't have any ICE facilities in my district, but Congress, everyone who has ICE facilities in their district, we have a legal right to show up unannounced to inspect that district. It's our oversight possibility. It's in the law. There shall be no, they have no right and authority and no funds, which means you cannot use a person, shall obstruct a Congress's inspection of any immigration facility. It's in the law. And what we are doing is, what Democrats are doing is showing up and doing those inspections. They have now said, oh, we're not going to let you in anymore, so there's going to be a whole battle. And the Congress actually, we're not, Article 1 is not allowed to sue Article 2, so Congress is not allowed to sue the administration. So we're looking at how do we get around that to try to address the fact that they're not allowing us to do those inspections. What kind of court proceeding will we do? Because we are legally authorized to do it. We will keep showing up even though they keep blocking us. And that's what Senator Padilla was doing. Remember, Senator Padilla was accompanied by FBI and Homeland Security when he went into that room. It wasn't him barging in. He was down the hall. It's like, oh, she hasn't been answering my question, I'll go ask her my question. It's his job. So we're going to continue to do that. And once again, as I mentioned earlier, if you hear of something, make sure you reach out to my local office, because we want to know, and we are getting reports where we are trying to find out where people go. You know, like I said, this administration is unlike any other where they are not being responsive to Congress, but that doesn't mean we don't stop, because every so often they do respond. We did several letters that got responses, that got like women's funding for women's research flowing again. We've gotten some agriculture money funding. So we just keep hitting on them, so keep us informed. And thank you very much for that question. I think I forgot to. Okay, we have one more question.
Can I answer? I want to.
Oh, sure.
Just
Yeah,
brief,
sanctuary state.
just briefly, the legislature's been working on this issue, and we had something called the Immigration Safety Bill, which I was a co-sponsor, which would have shut down the private prisons that are being used as ICE detention facilities. So we're working on it. It got through the House, and it got stuck again in the Senate, and we need whatever help we can get from you all, if you're in support of that concept, to start calling the Senate leaders in the New Mexico House, because we got it through the House floor. People are very much supportive. I mentioned this to a constituent. Our speaker, the Speaker of the House, Javier Martinez, father was a Mexican immigrant, lived a very productive life, and gave rise to a wonderful man who is now leading the state's legislature. So be aware, we're doing what we can, and we've been very open to supporting and providing sanctuary to immigrants, members of the LGBTQ community, women, doctors who want to provide health care to people that others object to. We do not interfere with those kinds of activities. And there's one last.
One last, you get it.
Do we still have time? No. Do we still have time?
For one more.
Or one more? Okay, Anne LePage, another friend of mine.
And Charlie is going to become our friend.
I think that's already been addressed in the public lands question earlier, so.
Okay.
Do you want me to do another?
Yeah.
One more.
Thank you, Ann.
Okay. Scott Weiner. Well, here you go.
So, correct me if my facts are wrong, the governor of Pennsylvania recently created legislation to forbid hedge funds from taking over critical public services, such as senior living, assisted living facilities, healthcare facilities. Is that something we can do in New Mexico?
Yep. So the question is, can New Mexico, like Pennsylvania, stop hedge funds, but I think you might mean private equity firms, from acquiring hospitals, healthcare facilities, et cetera, which is a big problem in this state already, Scott. There are about a dozen hospitals that are owned by private equity firms right now, and including our local hospital is a private equity owned hospital. So we have been doing a few things that are requiring disclosures from private equity firms, notice of mergers and purchases and the like. There was a bill that I co-sponsored with Representative Sapansky that would require that, and then require approval from the superintendent of insurance and have her or he get involved when those kinds of things are happening. But I will look into this idea of just banning them completely. I think it's going to be hard to do given the fact that they're already, frankly, embedded in our system here now. We know that private equity hospitals have poorer outcomes in general, I mean health outcomes, that's what I'm referring to here, than privately owned hospitals, not-for-profit hospitals and the like. And we have been addressing the issue to some degree, but I'll look into what you brought up, Scott. I think it's an interesting proposition.
Thank you, Scott. And you know, we've kind of come to the end. That's a very state question, but the issue of like ownership and mergers and oligopolistic behavior, I think is an important one. And what we had seen with the past administration was the beginning of enforcement of antitrust, right? Because we have a real problem. Like I always say, I'm in my community, I say, hey, I'm a big capitalist. I love capitalism, it's how we have business, but we need competition, right? And when you take away competition, which is slightly related, but when you take away competition, you take away really one of the ways in which the public and the consumer is protected. And a lot of what's happening when there's a focus on a quick return rather a long-term return, we see a lot of problems happening. I want to also call out Dylan. Dylan just started walking away. So we have Dylan in addition to Aubrey. And these are interns, and the reason I'm saying it is that there are a couple of things that we do in Congress that we have an amazing art competition, and Los Alamos does really well in a lot of our competition. We have an art competition, we have a coding competition, we help people get into the academies, and so please make sure that you know that we also have interns that serve us all year round. They actually do get paid a stipend, and so make sure that you know, because it is invaluable. Or come on up here. I want you guys to invaluable the work that we have with our interns, both in DC and in our local office, and they are hopefully learning a lot. Aubrey and Dylan. And with that, I'm going to open my call again. Please sign up for my newsletter. If you are not already signed up for my newsletter, you'll get to see pictures of all of our rural hospitals that we visited. Also, please make sure that you do sign up and follow me, and follow the Democratic Women's Caucus. The Democratic Women's Caucus, we're talking about needing to be rebellious storytellers, guerrilla storytellers, so that we are both gathering stories and telling out stories to every corner of America, because we represent people in every corner of America. My first duty is always to my district, but in the role I play, it is to every person in the United States. And because of the role the United States plays, and you know of this as well, is the work that gets done there impacts every person on this planet. Thank you for caring so much and for showing up at this town hall. Muchísimas gracias, everybody. Did you want to go up there? Yeah, if you go up there and take a minute.